Good morning, everybody. It is 9:31 on January the 14th, and I'm reconvening the Finance Committee Round 2 budget meeting for 2025. I'd like to acknowledge that the SCRD is still located on the traditional territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. And starting off this morning, we're going to be on item 6.12, starting on page 210. That's 2025 Round 2 budget proposal for regional planning. Just a little bit of echo that we're dealing with here, but in the meantime, directors, do you need any assistance with getting caught up to where we are at? Seeing nobody jumping up, I'm going to assume we're okay to start. Okay, so on page 210, budget proposal number 1 is the Regional Housing Coordinator, $83,650 funded through the MRDT grant program. Directors, do you have any questions, discussion, recommendations? Director McMahon.
Yes, let me see if I remember how this is done. I would like to move that the Regional Housing Coordinator budget proposal on page 210 be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. Is there any other discussion on the motion? If not, this is voting all directors. So I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? That motion's carried. All right, and moving on to budget proposal number 2 on page 211. This is Regional Housing Policy and Technical Support. $21,350, also funded through the MRDT granting program. I think this is new to us for round 2. Is that correct? Did staff just want to give like a 30-second highlight of what this project would entail?
Thank you, Chair. Gladly. So both of these proposals are actually new. They flow from the Committee of the Whole report on December the 12th. And as noted in that report, the funding available to SCRD through this revenue sharing program for 2025 enables some additional work relative to last year, which was proposed as some specific policy and technical support to local governments. And the scope of this work was defined following interviews with member municipality planning staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors, any questions, discussion, recommendations? Director Bax.
Yeah, I move that we incorporate the budget proposal. Let me find it. On page 211 of budget proposal number 2, Regional Housing Policy and Technical Support be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. All right, directors, is there any other discussion on this one? This is also voting all. I will call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Alternate Director Lumley opposed. Motion's carried. And that takes us to the end of that item in the agenda. So moving on to 6.13. This is rural planning, starting on page 213 in our agenda package. And directors, this is voting A, B, D, E, and F. So budget proposal number 1 on page 215 is framework for land use planning for environmentally sensitive areas. $50,000 suggested to be funded through either Community Works funds based on apportionment or option 2, which is taxation. Directors, any questions or discussion? Just before I go to my speakers list, I'll just go to the speakers list. Director McMahon.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I did read this the other day, but my brain is full and bits are leaking out now. So do I assume that this is to bring in extra capacity for the OCP process? Because, I mean, obviously this work needs to be done. So is it like a contracted extra capacity?
Thanks for the question. Not specifically, but yes, at the same time. So it is related to the OCP project, but it's also related to a number of other things, including the strategic plan, community climate action plan, as well as some of the fringe area planning work. So it will help provide essentially a framework for the board's consideration that outlines land use planning goals related to ecological stewardship and habitat connectivity at the watershed level, as well as area-specific objectives that might be contained in an OCP, for example. And so in such, it will both relate to the OCP project, the strategic plan, community climate action plan, and fringe area planning. So it's a kind of a bit broader, a little higher level, but it will help inform that work in the OCP. Thanks.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Yeah, it sounds to me like $50,000 is a drop in this bucket. And I assume also there would be collaboration within municipalities to try and ensure some degree of consistency between our areas.
Is that a question there? You're looking to see
Oh,
sort
what
of
the
regional
heck. I might
collaboration?
as well. Yeah, I'm in favor of it.
Okay, just before you move something on me here, I do see the CAO's hand up.
Yeah, I think too, I just want to comment that the board is still developing its and solidifying its scope for the OCP. So how it interfaces with that, I think needs to be discussed further, which is happening later this month. So this could also be contemplated as part of that.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Bax and then back to Director
Yeah, my
McMahon.
question is to deal with the funding source. The question I have is the Community Works Fund still has something in it, although we've already apportioned it. I heard yesterday that when we get to the end of the budget that we're going to circle around and see where we stand with the Community Works Fund and the other, whatever other grant funding we have. And so at this point, I'd like to make a choice to fund it through the CWF.
So as I said yesterday, anything in the budget that mentions gas tax as option one
Yeah.
is contemplated in the gas tax funding charts. So option one here, Community Works Funds. So option one is shown here as the Community Works Funds, so it is contemplated within that. Like, it's already factored in.
Money there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Director McMahon, are you okay if I go to Director Lee? Because I assume he's got another question before we go to a motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little weak on understanding why we haven't already done this in our OCPs. We're talking about riparian setbacks and when you need a development permit. And both of those seem like a lot of environmental protection for me. So I'm not sure what we're missing. Could you give me an example of what more needs to be done?
Thank you, Director Lee.
Thanks for the question. So one of the things is ground truth mapping. That's something that we don't have on ecological connectivity at this time. So there is some DPA work that was done back in 2011 that has informed in most of our OCPs at this time. But currently, we don't have bigger picture ground truth mapping. It's also to look at efficient guidance for the development of that land use policy as well. So at a board level, sort of like how far do we want to go within our legislative authority? So certainly meet our legislative authority as the minimums, but how far as a board is there willingness to go on the ecological connectivity pieces? So it's answering some of those bigger picture questions at a larger scale beyond the individual OCP. Thanks.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Lee?
Ground truthing, I assume that means we have a look at something like Google Earth and then we wander out there to see if it's right? Is that what you're talking about when you say ground truthing?
Yes, in part. I mean, it might look at a few things, including LiDAR data that we have that's a little bit more specific over some of the mapping that we have today, looking at maybe trends in existing QEP reports that we've had through our development permits through the years, and just larger climatic things that we've become aware of since 2011, 2012, when the first reports were done that informed our current DPAs. Thanks.
Thank you. Another follow-up?
It's a different question. I think I'll wait for Director McMahon.
I think Director McMahon's about to put a motion on the floor, so if it's,
Okay.
yeah.
So establishment of wildlife corridors, which it mentions here, is generally done on Crown land, not on private property, and we're not responsible for land use planning on government property. Am I missing something, or are we actually proposing to establish corridor wildlife corridors through fee simple property?
Very specific question, and actually probably part of what this report or this project is looking to help provide guidance on at a board level is how far do we want to go. For example, when we protect riparian corridors, in a sense, you're actually protecting wildlife corridors. They tend to often, wildlife tends to follow creeks and other natural assets. So depending on the level of protection that's provided on fee simple land, while it might not be a specific government-held wildlife corridor, it in a sense actually is helping to protect those corridors on a grander scale. So this work would help to inform, though, how far do we want to go with those policies in our OCPs and other intergovernmental work that's being done on other OCPs, sort of looking with a larger regional planning gaze, and also what is important in terms of community climate action plan. So there's often co-benefits that come with protecting these corridors. So by keeping things like trees and plants in the ground, we actually help to retain steep slopes and stop things like landslides. There's also other factors that can go beyond as well when we start to look at things like wildfire interfaces and how that larger piece fits together with development in the regional district. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Stamford.
I'd just like to respond to Director Lee. We looked at a subdivision rezoning application a couple of months ago, and in the report, it was identified that it was a elk area, that there was anecdotal movements of elk through that particular property. So it did become another part of what we looked at and part of our decision-making. I'd like to be able to do it more than anecdotally. I'd like to have a bit more information when that kind of response comes to us. So that's just an example of how we could use it.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
In fact, I had a question, but I just wanted to say that my OCP does not contemplate wildlife corridors, and it really should. It came up a little bit during the last OCP process, but the then committee was like, oh, we've never heard of that. So I think people have heard of it now. The apportionment of the Community Works Fund is based on taxation, and I assume this is because it's offsetting taxation, except that our Community Works funds are apportioned by population per capita. So I'm kind of, that's a CFO question, like, should we not be doing this per capita rather than, and I'm asking this despite the fact I get off real cheap on this, but should we not be doing it per capita and instead of on taxation apportionment?
Good question. I'll go to the CAO, CFO.
Yeah, I think that those are some interesting concepts. We don't really have any formal policies on those types of things. We're just, I think, modeling it with different types of projects that we've done similar to this. And because it's generally for all land use types, we thought apportionment made good sense because it's not a per person type of analysis. So you could go either way.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director McMahon?
Yeah, I actually would prefer it on the per capita basis. Partly just my area in I'm a fringe area, and I also need some of these updated policies because they really weren't considered when my OCP was written. So I feel like I should not be the lowest contributor to this particular project. So I would actually like to move that the framework for land use planning for environmentally sensitive areas budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget with the funding from community works funds based on per capita distribution.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Director Stanford. We can do that. We're going to be revisiting a couple of items at the end anyways, so we'll have to make an adjustment to the gas tax or to the Community Works Fund apportionments before we conclude this meeting. If we do that, because that's not the way it was calculated out. So it is our decision, 100%. So Director Lee, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak in favor of Director McMahon's motion on the funding formula, but I'd like to ask one more question as well. Now, my reason that I support Director McMahon's motion on the splitting of the funding formula is that's the way we got the darn thing, so that's the way we should spend the darn thing. It's that simple for me. But my last question of staff is that we're going beyond legislated requirements here. And I'm not sure that we should be setting standards for this kind of protection. I believe it's more of a provincial or federal job to define. Because in a lot of cases, we could be considering taking uses of private land away from private individuals when you do things like this, which in my opinion, that's what the riparian setback does. You're actually taking land away from private individuals that had an understanding when they purchased it that they could use it a certain way, and all of a sudden we pass new legislation that says you can't use it that way anymore. I'm not fond of a local government doing that kind of thing. So that's why before I've only voted for legislated changes only, and I will be doing that again this time. Not that I'm against the principle, I just think we're setting what should be a legislated by the province to do this kind of thing, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Did you want to weigh in on some of that, GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points of response for clarity from staff. One is there may be gaps between our current policy framework and land use bylaws and legislative requirements, and that's covered in point 3 in the rationale. But the more global point is that this project is about creating a framework that would come before the board for decision, perhaps at multiple stages, for policy decision, and restrictions on land through, for example, development permits it's one tool in the toolbox. There are many others, and so there's no suggestion of a one-size-fits-all approach here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wonder too, not being intimately familiar with the OCPs of the rural areas, Pender Harbors, I think, is the most recent OCP. And so are there elements that might already be covered off within the Pender Harbor OCP that other areas have to play catch up on as part of this work? Like, is there a component of that? Or again, not being familiar with all the area OCPs, it might just be my own ignorance. Thank you, GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. That's certainly possible. There are differences based in part on age of our OCPs, and it would be something that would be researched further as part of this project. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm also wondering if some of this work might feed into a a park acquisition policy, because that is one of the ways that we can protect areas. And I know it's been a bit of a difficult situation that I have one park that is in fact a ravine. And so it's not a developed park, but it is protecting a sensitive area and a wildlife corridor. Another large property that's in a ravine was offered to be donated to the SCRD as a park, and it was turned down based on potential liability. But I think we have to have a policy about how we acquire land and what for and what purposes. And does staff think that some of this work might feed into our park's future?
Thank you, Director McMahon. Letting the two competing departments discuss here, contemplate who's going to answer that question for you. But GM Hall?
Thank you. I can offer a general answer to say that that would certainly be in scope of recommendations that might come out of this work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee, I see your hand up again.
Yes, I'm a little passionate about all this, but in fact, I do believe I will support it based on GM's last answer, which is to say, give us more information so we can make a more informed decision, and I'm all for that. So yes, I've changed my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. All right, I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is A, B, D, E, and F. Are we okay, guys? Okay. Perfect, thank you. In that case, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. And that concludes that item in our agenda. Now, 6.14, 2025 Round 2 Budget Proposal for Hillside Development Project. This is starting on page 218 of our agenda package. We have a recommendation on page 218, and we also have a budget proposal on 219. So we'll start with the budget proposal on page 219, which is Hillside Head Lease Renewal Project, 0.3 FTE for 2025 and 2026. $90,000 per year for 2 years, funded from reserves. And Hillside is voting all directors. Director McMahon. I'm looking at my speakers list and I see Director McMahon's hand up, so I'm going to Director McMahon. I'm not going to Director McMahon. Director Stamford.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the budget proposal on page 219, titled Hillside Head Lease Renewal Project, be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. Now that we have a motion on the floor, directors, are there any questions or discussion of the motion? Director Bax.
Yeah, as much as I've tried to become familiar with this portfolio, I don't quite understand it. Can I get a Coles Notes explanation? I know it's a brand name, as to what the Hillside head lease actually is, and how the SCRD benefits from this.
GM Hall. Oh, I'm going to go to the CAO.
Yeah, there has been many reports. Perhaps what we could do is we could always offer up a little bit of a lunch and learn if folks feel like there's more of an orientation element associated with it. There's been a lot of history and background with this particular item, dates back to 1992, maybe even before. So just understanding the evolution of this would be, I think, helpful for the directors, and maybe in a different venue.
And ultimately not, part of the budget process. The rationale is provided on page 219 if the director would like to read it. It was pointed out to me while you were making your comments that we did technically approve the project back at round 1. This is to add in the 0.3 FTE. So the project is underway, will be underway, we just need to appoint some resource to it. So I do have the motion on the floor to approve and incorporate with the 0.3 FTE. Director Stanford, is your hand residual or new? Okay, Director Inkster.
Yeah, thanks. I look forward to the lunch and learn. There's a lot of history here, including sort of the ebb and flow of RD funding for that particular project, and many beliefs within the RD board and the community that was sort of the panacea of economic development of the Sunshine Coast. It would lead to hundreds and perhaps thousands of jobs. So now it's interesting. So I look forward to that. I was here when we were starting to fund it heavily a number of years ago, and it's an interesting project how certain things have been developed there, certain lots, and certain lots have not been developed. So I look forward to the lunch and learn.
Thank you, Director Inkster. And given that really it's an amendment for the 0.3 FTE to be added to the project, the motion that was made does cover off the recommendation on 218. So I don't see any hands remaining, assuming Director Inkster's is residual. In that case, I will call the question. This is voting all. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We're on to round 2 budget proposal for ports services, starting on page 221. This is item 6.15. And this is voting B, D, E, and F. And so we start with budget proposal 1 on page 221, Keats Landing Dock Major Repairs Project Budget Lift. $268,500 funded through Community Works funds, apportioned to the participants in the service. And Director, any questions from directors? If not, I'll look to Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm always excited to see Ports Works come up, and I really appreciate how much other areas support ports, because they're primarily in Area F and support the islands. I move that budget item on page 221, titled Keats Landing Dock Major Repairs Project Budget Lift, be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget.
And I've got a seconder for that, thank you. Any discussion on this motion? Areas B, D, E, and F will be voting on it. I don't see any hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. All right, now, budget proposal 2 on page 223 is a 0.13 FTE marine infrastructure budget lift, 14,892 from taxation. Directors, any questions, discussion? Director Stanford?
Thank you, Chair. I move that budget item on page 223, entitled Capital Project Coordinator Marine Infrastructure Budget Lift at 0.13 FTE, be approved and incorporated into budget 2025.
Thank you, and I've got a number of seconders for that. Any questions or discussion? Director Bax?
Just one question. It says that it's in area B and F, and it's a taxation. And so is this taxation only going to affect those 2 areas?
No.
Okay,
It would be the ports function, which is B, D, E, and F.
okay,
It affects B and F because
that's the location.
D and E, I don't believe, have any
No, we don't have
port
any
infrastructure. Yeah, so, okay. Any other questions from directors? If not, I will call the question. B, D, E, and F, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right. That is that one. Moving on to 6.16. Let me get my pages sorted out here. So this is options for resourcing, 3 additional 2025 budget proposals, Catherine Lake Park Management Plan, Dan Bosch Park Management Plan, and West Beach Park Erosion Mitigation Planning, starting on page 225. Did staff want to speak to this or here for questions? Okay, here for questions. All right, directors, we do have the report here. This report is to support decision-making for the directors, based on having moved some not recommended projects to round 2. We asked for, resource implications or ways that we could get these projects moving. And so this is the report that comes with it. And so, yeah, option A at the bottom of page 228 talks about deferring or canceling some projects to sort of free up some bandwidth within the staffing complement. Option B, considers approving a new 1.0 FTE parks person to support execution of these projects. So, directors, do you have any questions or discussion on this item? Director McMahon. Director Stanford?
I have a question about the proposed 1 point FTE. Is this a term FTE or is this an ongoing permanent person?
Thank you for the question. I'll start with a comment. As the board is aware, in round 1, we moved forward the Parks Service Review, which will be this coming year, and we'll look at our structure and our staffing and our needs to support. So the option in front of you, option B, would be to support a permanent FTE in advance of that Park Service Review, knowing that there were other projects that were not recommended as well, and we know that we've got lots of backlog within parks. Specifically, we know that these 3 projects are important, but the capacity to be able to execute is somewhat challenged, so this would support that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Director McMahon.
Yes, this is a really challenging situation because on the one hand, I don't want to spend more money. We've spent a lot of money already. But on the other hand, it's obvious that the current staffing of parks is not able to meet the demand that's going on. And I worry that some of these projects, if we keep putting them off, there won't be a park left by the time we get there. So I think that, and I anticipate that the Park Service Review is going to say that we are going to have to make some choices about parks, but we have a lot of parks and we don't have many staff to maintain them. So I am, with some reluctance, in favor of the proposal for another staff person in parks. I guess the only question I have is the management level the right place to put the resourcing?
That's a good question. Just while the GM gets queued up there, if you look at the top of page 229, the projects that are being considered for deferral, if we wanted to free up capacity, don't exactly look like a whole lot of boots on the ground type work. It looks like it's a lot of engineering, technical support, planning type work. So, GM?
Thank you. Then I turn on my camera, so let someone in the air speaking. We actually haven't totally landed on exactly what position this will be. It's not management perspective. We only have one management within parks, and that's our parks manager. The rest are all service staff or planning staff. So we know it fits somewhere in between frontline worker and planner, but probably, like you said, more technical in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before I go back to my speakers list, one thing I made a note here, I just didn't get a chance to mention it, is that with that Parks Service Review planned for 2025, it really does become a question of, do you want to get out ahead of that service review, or are you okay to wait to get that service review to figure out what all of the parks division needs in terms of support and structure. Director Stanford?
Yeah, I agree. This is far more complicated than just the ask of itself. But I feel that over the last couple of budgets, we haven't put a lot of support into parks and trails specifically, and in hopes that we'll see the parks review or service review. Meanwhile, things are getting worse and worse and worse, and there's going to be a point where we just need far more support than we would have needed if we had been able to get to these projects years beforehand. So my concern more is that we are going to fund this and that actual external agencies are going to be holding it up rather than our ability to get to work on them. That there's other authorities out there that hold the permits, hold the decision-making, and that we still won't be able to get to them. And the impact to our community is quite serious. So I will be voting in favor of this, but it's tough. I just think we need to start supporting our parks and trails before, like Director McMahon said, before they disappear. And to me, this is climate change impacts on communities on the ground. You can see it happening. It's far more dramatic in our parks, especially on our waterfront areas. And this is what it looks like. It's going to be expensive.
Thank you. I see the CAO's hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think that this is where I just want to make sure it's very explicit, just as far as process. And so staff are recommending the service review, and hence part of that service review is to make some decisions about service levels and about potentially the assets that you're going to keep and the types of classifications that you're going to do. You don't have that right now. So what's happening is you have some known issues, but what's not in front of you today are the things you don't know about. And so these are potentially leapfrogging some of those. And there's some risks associated with some of these that you might want to make some different decisions. It's assuming that we want to maintain these types of assets in the context of all the elements that were mentioned, such as climate change, service level, those types of things. So I think why staff made a not recommended consideration for the board is because that is best practice, is to make a fully informed decision. And this is somewhat making a vacuum level decision or taking staff off on a different direction instead of that more holistic work that's needed for the service and that hasn't been done. And all the elements you talked about is what would surface out of that service review. So that just needs to be considered. We appreciate the public demand, the public expectations. There will be more and there will be additional considerations from a service level perspective, but those will come out as the service review's completed.
Thank you. Director Lee.
This is a really tough one for me. I'm under extreme pressure to limit the % increase this year. I thought that we would have had enough staff in place to do everything we needed to do based on previous year's staffing. But we have not addressed parks at all. We haven't done anything to help ourselves. I have parks projects that are on the books prior to me becoming director 6 years ago, and they haven't moved. I have one that we're proposing to cancel forever, which I don't agree with. We don't have enough staff in parks to actually take a good look at everything that needs to be done and be very clear about what needs to be done. And if we can actually overcome the challenges we have in a certain manner, whether it's political or engineering or... So we need to do a better job of scoping the work so we understand. I believe that's what this person is proposing to do for us. I think that's regardless of an organization review. It's a skill set that we don't have related to parks because we don't have enough staff in parks to develop that skill set. We have a limited amount of it because we get some things done. But if I look at Vinebrook Bridge, I promised my constituents that we would be putting the bridge in 24. We're now proposing maybe to scope it out in 26. There's something very wrong. If an additional staff person focused on that kind of thing for all of our projects, I don't care which ones, there's a whole list of everybody's got them. It would get us closer to shovel ready when we make the decision. And it's quite a shame when you have money to do the project, but you don't have a project leader. That's really, really bad. And so this looks to me like the project leader we need to get that work in place. I understand we're going to do a review of parks. I understand there's other things we're doing as well. If we use that logic, we wouldn't be funding our water services this year. So, well, I understand that things might change next year based on the study. I don't want to wait another year, honestly, to get started. I think there's projects we need to take a risk at and go for. And I believe that this will give us the horsepower to do that. And I'm going to take a beating, but that's the way it is. You got to make decisions. So I'm in favor of it, option 2.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair, and with the caveat that none of these projects are in my area. I am not in support of this. I am also under a lot of pressure. I'm now at 9.59% increase after yesterday. And knowing that this was not recommended by staff and it is not in our strategic plan as a priority, and that we have a parks review plan for this year, which should give us a more holistic, like a way for us to be a bit more strategic about it. I would rather defer to next year for both these projects. And I know that, both directors for both areas are under a lot of pressure from their constituents, so I feel I feel for you, but I just simply cannot support this at this time.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yeah, I appreciate staff wanting to do things in the correct order, like get all the planning done first. But I've been sitting here for 6 years waiting for something to happen with parks, and we don't seem to get there. It's very, very frustrating, and I appreciate that the Parks Review should be done next year, but we've got 200 projects that keep sliding, and we don't get there. And the number one friction point in my area, other than roads, which are not my problem, is parks. And it's parks maintenance, and it's parks planning, and it's decisions about who maintains the parks, and attempting to work with volunteer groups in the community. And yeah, people are very, very frustrated in my area. So I realize that we're in the position once again of building the plane while we're flying it, but we kind of got to do something. Parks are the lowest barrier public resource we provide. Anybody can use our parks. The connector trails are really important. They get our pedestrians to the bus stops. They get the kids to school. And all of our parks, or not all of them, but many of them are suffering from just inadequate maintenance in the face of increasing public demand. And extra windstorms that knock down more trees, so there has to be more maintenance, and it just keeps coming. So I am hoping that staff will deal creatively with the challenge that we're throwing at you, which is to bring in more staffing before we've got a full plan nailed down. And I hope that this will work out.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Bax, you're the last on the speakers list.
Yes, our Parks Department is, it's a unique part of the regional district government. It's one of the things that our constituents interact with most often, I believe, and there has been in the past opportunities to work with volunteer groups, and I think because we've gotten to this point now where we're overwhelmed without the resources to deal with all the issues in our parks, that I think it's even more important for us to try to recruit people that can help with our parks. I know that there's a volunteer trail hosting program that we have for Dakota Ridge, and I would like to see that extended to some of our parks, if possible, to allow work crews to do some of the grunt work that needs to be done. I know we have a lot of people in our community that are capable and more than willing to give time and energy towards our parks because they love them so much. And I'm very interested in seeing that type of work go forward. I think it's no crime to ask for help from the community, as we give the community so much, and they are more than willing to give back to us.
Thank you, Director Bax. Not seeing any other hands on my speakers list. Director Lee.
Couldn't find my buttons. I just wanted to check on something before we vote. We had a email saying that what our current percentage was, and I believe that percentage included if we had passed all of our do not recommend was added in that total. And I was going to ask if that was correct. And I've now got the answer that that isn't. It goes on. It'll be around, for me then, it'll be about 0.5% more on mine. I'm 40,000 for 1%, and 1/5 of this is around 20, so I would be about 0.5. I think everybody else is, I'm the high, so everybody else would be somewhat down from there on top of that figure. Just so when we vote, I think, do I have that correct? Rule of thumb?
GM?
Chair, if I may, my understanding from discussion with finance staff yesterday is that the budget proposal, so your R2 budget proposal, not your staffing report, your budget proposal, which has not recommended projects like the park management plans, West Beach, those are built in, those costs, which are about consulting costs and study costs, those costs are built in to your what-if scenario. What is not built in is the staffing component, because those were not recommended by staff. So the staffing report gives you options. If you want to move those projects forward, you need to approve not only the project costs, but the staffing costs. So that staffing cost is not built in to your what-if scenario. That's my understanding.
You preempted my
Thank you.
understanding as well, because this report came to us with an option A or an option B, and one involved a staff cost and one did not. So I couldn't see how the staff cost could have been built into the what-ifs, because we hadn't made a decision there. But I did see the not recommendeds within the what-if scenario, so CAO.
Yeah, I think a learning going forward is it should have still been a BP, because it's completely excluded from the budget proposal. So anyone trying to follow along, including me, didn't see that built in because the costs are in the budget. So it could have been like option 1 and 2. So we can put that on the debrief parking lot for future with not recommended, and understanding that this is kind of the first kick of the can that we're using this type of terminology and approach for this year's budget. So no, it's not included in what I sent around. yesterday. And so those were those elements in the initial presentation that I sent, that we had decisions that weren't quite included in there. So that included the firefighter compensation and some of these not recommended.
Thank you. If the directors felt so inclined, the information for a motion is located in the middle of page 229. It mentions that the cost of an additional staff resource would be 90,111 prorated for 9 months, including benefits, and that this would need to be included as part of the round 2 budget proposal if that option is desired by the board. So that recommendation, based on what I'm hearing, would read something like 1.0 FTE for parks, prorated for 9 months for 2025, in the amount of $90,111 funded through taxation, be approved and incorporated into the 2025 round 2 budget. So I'm seeing some head nods. I'm going to go to Director McMahon with her hand up.
Yes, just from a process point of view, I thought perhaps we could go through all the parks projects. And then if we approve them, then we better approve the staffing to do them. But if we look at the projects that start on page 237, then we know what we're dealing with. And then we could circle back to the staffing component. I have disrupted the process.
You have disrupted the process.
Sorry.
It had to be somebody's turn this morning. The resource that's being proposed, well, chicken and egg, the resource that's being proposed is less about getting like the Cliff Gilker Park remediation work done as it is about, you know, the extra requests that have been brought forward by directors.
There are several not recommended parks projects in here. So if we pass the not recommended park projects, then we need the staff.
Okay, why don't we take just a 5-minute break? It's almost 10:30. We'll come back at 10:30. We'll have some clarity over what order we want to do this. Welcome back to the Finance Committee Round 2 Budget for January 14th. The request was made that we actually discuss the budget proposals within 6.17 first. And then we will step back to 6.16 to look at the options that are there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move to page 237 in the agenda package. And we're going to start with the budget proposals that are here in community parks. We'll work through those and then we'll step back. So the first one on the agenda here is budget proposal number 3, Cliff Gilker Bridges and Trail Remediation, Park Recovery, 1.198850, one-time funding through Community Works funds as option 1 with an apportionment, or option 2, each of 4 areas paying an amount. So we'll go to Director McMahon first.
Yeah, I just had a question about apportionment and the pros and cons. I assume that option A includes the shekels that are left in area F, and option 2 takes pity on area F and divides it among the other 4 participants. I don't have a strong opinion on this, so I was just soliciting input from other directors.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Bax.
Thank you. Well, I would like to put this budget proposal number 3 be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget, the Cliff Gilker Bridges and Trails Remediation Park Recovery, using option 1.
Thank you, Director Bax. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Director Stamford. Director Stamford, I turn to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that Area F never seems to have any money. But I also note that there's a lot of activity and projects that everybody supports in Area F. And I think, to me, that's the purpose of these funds, is to spend them. So I'm more than happy to support it.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Yeah, Community Works Fund, that's a gas tax thing. Area A is, gas tax was supposed to be for our own infrastructure, but I'm already expressed support for this based on hope for the future for me. And I'd like to point out that we do have this sheet that we were given yesterday that talks about the proportion of all of these, not just one in isolation. And in fact, I've agreed to support all of them, so I'm happy with what's here.
Thank you, Director Lee. And we will be revisiting that spreadsheet at the end because it's already changed based on the environmentally sensitive areas, one where the apportionment changed. So that chart, we'll have to revisit it at the end of the meeting just to see where everything lands. Director Lee, your hand is residual, I assume. Okay, is there any other discussion on this project? If not, I will call the question A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. Next up, on page 239, we have budget proposal number 5, which is access improvements to Chaster Park, $143,000 funded from taxation. Director McMahon.
Yes, I would like to move that the budget proposal access improvements to Chaster Park on page 239 be approved and incorporated in the 2025 budget.
Second.
And I've got a seconder for that. Director Cabias.
Thank you, Chair. Is there, are there no other funding sources than taxation for this one? Is there a reason why Community Works funds can't be used, or?
Thank you. I wonder if this is because it's decommissioning assets, if it can't be, but I'll look to the CAO.
It's also because we fully allocated the funds.
We're broke.
And it is a little bit to the latter part, which is, it doesn't quite fit with the criteria for community works.
Well, as I'm pinching pennies, trying to find ways to reduce taxation, I guess would it be possible to cover what could be covered by community works funds? And I understand that, CEO said it's been fully allocated, but we've clawed back a little bit from the Langdale well field to pay for maybe half of this, or I know I'm maybe splitting hairs here, but I'm really trying hard to decrease the increase.
Thank you. So you're wondering if it could be 50% funded from community works funds and,
could be,
or
what could fall under it, but.
CAO?
Yeah, I mean, we're not really contributing to a new asset. There's some improvements to the site, so we'd have to bring it back, and I don't feel comfortable kind of doing that on the fly, because we've got to have something in the minutes, so.
You might have to approve it for now, and then between now and board, maybe we can have a conversation offline about it and change something at the board table. Director McMahon?
Yes, I support that because I know staff said they were going to look into whether community works funds could be used on this. And a broader question, like community works has said that we can spend it on climate adaptation and mitigation. And some of the adaptation and mitigation is going to be decommissioning assets. It's going to be, it's like the landfill. When we close it, we still have a responsibility for it. And when we step back from climatically risky areas, there's going to be costs associated with that. So I don't know if it could be a query to UBCM about the use of these kind of funds, because this is this is maybe the first, but it's not going to be the last.
Thank you. Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. I am in support of this project, however we do choose to fund it. It is in direct competition to some of my other projects that have been deferred, such as Vinewood Bridge and Kleinedale Bridge, but in fact there is ways around them. So I, in good conscience, couldn't ask for that when some of these are necessary to get access. I have reduced usability, but still usability in those projects, so I do agree. And I do note it is using staff resources that could be doing some of my other projects. So I am in favor of this, but I'm with Director McMahon. We need to clarify the funding.
Thank you. I'm wondering if somebody would like to make a motion to get it on the floor, and like I said, we can review it before we get to board, and sorry, thank you. It's been a long morning already, okay? I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that's carried. No, I'm gonna make a note of it. We'll follow up offline, because staff wouldn't be able to action that until we get it to the board table for endorsement, at which point we're endorsing these as well. So it's something that needs to be discussed between now and board. Just make a note of it, put it in the parking lot, and we'll follow up before board. Okay? Okay. Moving on to budget proposal number 6 on page 240. This is a park management plan for Catherine Lake. $75,000 funded from taxation. Director Bax.
I move that the following budget proposal be deferred to 2026. Budget proposal number 6 on page 240, Park Management Plan, Catherine Lake.
And I've got a seconder for that. Okay. Director Lee.
I would have liked to have had a chance to talk first, as it is in my area, but I see I wasn't afforded that privilege. which I don't think is appropriate, but however, I will now speak. This particular project I'm hoping we don't have to do a park management plan. I'm hoping we can do some consultation and maybe get a project in without one, was always my hope. But without a project at all, you can't do anything. It just sits there. I understand all the reasons, but the background to this is that I have community groups that want it, have offered to fund the actual project and do the actual work and do the project management for getting it. Our challenge was to get the permits in place, and that's where we're having the trouble. We have a lot of parks projects where there is stewardships. This one just happens to be a high-profile one, and we have difficulties because of that. But I was hoping there was some way around it. And so to have it on the books so that we could at least go forward and investigate and then decide how much we were going to actually spend on it. And I believe if we're going to do a parks management plan for any park, we as a group should get together and decide which ones should be done first, second, third. I shouldn't be forcing a project on someone to say, do mine first. So that's my thoughts. I've made my sales pitch. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. My apologies for not coming to you first. It was not my intention. I went with the speakers list that I had in front of me. So Director Bax was just quickest to put his hand up. However, I will continue through my speakers list now that I have it. Director McMahon.
Yes, I sympathize with the problems and the frustration because I also am extremely frustrated. However, we are facing a reality where maintaining our parks has become far more complicated than we ever, I think, foresaw because of all kinds of regulatory stuff that is raining down on us. And with extreme reluctance, I have concluded that we probably need to wait for the parks review. It really needs to get done this year because we are faced with so many, I don't think it's fair to say moldering parks, but parks that need TLC really badly. So I will, with reluctance, vote against this budget proposal.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, it was I do apologize to the director from Area A. It was not my intention to step on your toes. It was my intention to bring forward this proposal to defer so that because we have to start cutting somewhere, and it's in my mind, waiting for the parks review is the best way to go about figuring out what we should do within the Parks Department, including these other parks around the regional district. And I just didn't want to have the director from Area A have to turn down this himself.
Thank you, Director Bax. I don't see any other speakers to this item. We do have a motion on the floor to defer. I'm going to call the question, A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor of the motion to defer? And those opposed? I've got 3 in favor and 2 opposed. That motion's carried. Moving on to budget proposal number 7, Park Management Plan for Dan Bosch Park, $75,000, also funded from taxation. I don't have a speakers list, but I will go to Director Lee. I will not make that mistake twice.
It's not a mistake. I wasn't fast enough to get my hand up. It's not your issue, Chair, but thank you. This one is a little different, but it's very much the same issue. Dan Bosch Park is actually leased, which makes it even more complicated than Catherine in getting approvals to do work in it. It's a terrible shame that we're going to lose somebody eventually getting run over on the highway, because that's where they're parked. And my community has offered to make the parking lot bigger so that people don't have to park on the highway or park across in a parking lot that's used by the Sunshine Coast Trail. So the two options are to park on the highway or park across the highway and then do a run across the highway. Very dangerous when ferry traffic's coming. But it's still the same issue. We have to get the permits before my community can actually do the work. And so that's the way it is. I have no motion to make. I'll let my fellow directors do it.
Thank you, Director Lee. Any other speakers? Director McMahon.
Sure, I will make a motion that the park management plan for Dan Bosch Park, page 241, be deferred to 2026.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. Any other speakers to this motion? Director McMahon, I assume your hand is residual? That's okay. If not, Director Gabius?
Just a quick comment to say, this is not fun to do, obviously, and just a, thank you to Director Lee for his comments, and, hoping that Area A can grant us a bit of patience, and we'll hopefully get to it next year. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Gabius. I'm hoping that out of the service review, there's going to be the opportunity for a lot of improvements that will see a lot of changes for Area A and Area F being another area that doesn't get a lot of parks attention. Yeah, so there's a lot of work that's got to be done to set everybody up for success, because the last thing we want to do is be adding projects that we know we can't get to. And so we've got to make sure that, we've been working on this corporate prioritization. We've been working on trying to figure out, what goes first with the resources and the people that we have. And so we have to try and get through that process to help us be better positioned for 2026. I think 2025 is just going to be a bit of a stumble along until we can get that corporate prioritization nailed down. And we'll have a park service review in 2025, hopefully figured out. Yeah, so I don't see any other speakers. I do have a motion on the floor to defer. I'm going to call the question A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And those opposed? Director Lee and Director Stanford opposed. That motion's carried. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, but I assume both of you would like your votes in opposition recorded for both of those. Yeah, so we'll record those. Okay. Budget proposal number 8 on page 242. West Beach Park Erosion Mitigation Planning, $95,000 funded from taxation, not recommended for 2025 as well. Director Stanford.
I'll just make a couple comments and then I will put the recommendation out for consideration. I just want people to note that under risk factor, this is high risk urgent service level impact. Keats Island has already had one trail to a public beach closed. And this is, West Beach is the most popular access point on the island for summer access to the beach. Most of the island is high bank, so there's always challenges getting to the waterfront. I do recognize that this is a complex project that has reliance on different authorities, but given how long this has been an issue and the level of advocacy that the community is consistently looking to the SRD for support on this particular trail, I'm hoping people will consider this urgent and bring it forward for this budget. So given that, I move that budget proposal number 8 on page 242, titled West Beach Park Erosion Mitigation Planning, be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? I do, from Director Lee. Thank you, Director Lee. Any other discussion from directors? Director McMahon.
I am really reluctant to defer this. However, the MODI, or now MOT portion of this makes it pretty complicated. And should this budget proposal fail, I am wondering if there is any further advocacy we can do with the Ministry of Transportation, because this is not the only area where we have overlapping problems. Chester Beach is another one. And we need a better way forward to try and get their cooperation in resolving some of these issues, especially around stormwater, and don't get me started on that.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Stanford.
In response, yes, I recognize that MOT is a part of this. I don't think anything's going to change from this year to the next. In fact, I think it'll just continue to deteriorate. I know regional district staff are speaking with MOT on this and other files. If anything, this funding just continues to provide the opportunity to keep the advocacy going at a staff level.
Thank you. I do have a motion on the floor to approve and incorporate, and I don't see any other speakers, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? And that's defeated. Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion, I presume, to defer? Director Gabius?
Thank you, Chair, and, again, this is a bummer, and I know you've been under a lot of pressure from your community, and I really thank them for coming as a delegation to explain to us what the situation was, and hopefully next year we can tackle these. So I will make a motion that the project, which is right here, number 8, West Beach Park Erosion Mitigation Planning, be deferred to 2026.
Thank you. And I've got a seconder for that. I don't see any other speakers on the speakers list. I will call the question. A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And opposed? That motion's carried. Thank you. Now, I think this is the last one in this, last one in this section on page 243, budget proposal number 9, which is the Pender Harbor Living Heritage Society Community Benefit Grant. It's $5,000 to be funded from taxation. Director Lee?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to understand more about why it would be not recommended for 2025. I'm not sure why that recommendation would come forward.
GM?
Thank you, Chair. I think the answer is similar to why there's a whole lot of other projects that aren't necessarily coming forward. It's staff trying to balance all of the priorities that are out there and understanding that the board is trying to balance the taxation impact. So That's one of the reasons it wasn't recommended, but certainly it's up to the board to choose otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
As a follow-up then, am I to understand the reason that this was turned down is because staff has decided that we have too much taxation already? Is that the correct understanding?
Haven't turned it down yet, Director Lee.
Not recommended.
I believe I heard that part of that was taxation related, part of that recommendation, yes.
I can understand not enough staff. I can understand not enough reserves, but I struggle with a staff recommendation that's telling us how we should tax.
The good news is it's our decision to make. So
Yes.
you're welcome to make a motion to whatever effect you would like.
I'd like to make a motion that we award $5,000 to the Pender Harbor Living Heritage Community for the installation of a heat pump.
$5,000 funded from taxation.
Yes.
Thank you. And I've got a seconder for that. Thank you, Director Bax. Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm also a little puzzled about this one, particularly since it sounds like the Living Heritage Society is planning to do the work and we are merely contributing some money. Should this, and I'm a little puzzled why it's in budget and why it's not a grant and aid request, because this sounds like something that would go through grant and aid.
It was a grant and aid request, and it was declined at grant and aid because they're under their agreement is under the Parks Service, so we can't provide grant and aid to something through our own functions.
Yeah.
So we've discussed
Thanks
this
for the
already and turned it down
reminder.
at grant and aid.
Well, I like heat pumps.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Lee, I see your hand up. Is that new or residual? Okay. I don't see any other hands up. I will call the question. This is A, B, D, E, and F. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to the end of that item in our agenda. We are going to step back to 6.16, but given that we deferred the three budget proposals that were tied to 6.16, there is no need for us to make a motion out of that unless directors have any last minute questions or discussion. Otherwise, we'll keep moving in the agenda because it's already 11 o'clock. Okay? So 6.17 is done, 6.16 is done. So next up, we're moving to 6.18, public transit. And let me get my papers in front of me here. All right. So, budget proposal 1 on page 246, annual operating agreement, base budget lift. It's 189,170, funded through taxation and BC Transit recovery / fare revenue. BDEF, District of Sechelt, Town of Gibson's SNGD. Any questions from directors or recommendations? Director McMahon.
Yes, I think we've discussed the transit plan several times. So I would like to move that the budget proposal annual operating agreement base budget lift for transit be approved and incorporated in 2025 budget.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? I do. Thank you, Director Bax. Is there any other discussion from directors? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And that's the end of the transit one. Next up, we're moving on to 6.19, which is budget proposal for Mason Road Yards on page 249. And on page 249, we have budget proposal 1, which is Mason Road Yards infrastructure upgrades, phase 1, supporting phase 2 of the electric vehicle project, $167,000 funded from Local Government Climate Action Plan. Director McMahon.
Yes, we have also previously discussed this, and we need to move it along, and I note that the funding source is LG cap, not taxation. So I would like to move that the budget proposal on page 249 for Mason Yards infrastructure upgrades be approved and incorporated in the 2025 budget.
And I've got a seconder for that. Thank you. This is also voting all directors. Any discussion or comments from directors? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? Motion is carried. That is the end of Mason Road Yards. So next up, we move on to 6.20, which is a budget proposal for Field Road Building Maintenance 114. And we are looking at budget proposal 2. Thank you, GM Gagnon. We're looking at budget proposal 2 on page 253. So Field Road Vehicle Compound Extension and upgrades for additional electrical vehicles, $150,000. Also funded from LG cap. Director Bax.
Yes, I would like to move that the following budget proposal be approved and incorporated into the 2025 budget. Field Road Vehicle Compound Extension and upgrades for additional electric vehicles, part of EV Phase 2 2022 project. Budget proposal number 2.
Thank you, Director Bax. And I've got a seconder from Director McMahon. Is there any other discussion or questions? If not, this is voting all directors. I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay. Next up, we have item 6.21, 2025 Round 2 Budget Proposal for General Government and UBCM/AVICC Electoral Area Services. Just before I go to my speakers list, directors, I would like to propose that we actually cut this lift in half. I think we've had some conversations about, whether we should all be going to all the conferences, and, Director McMahon has raised some issues around whether FCM should even be a considered conference. And so I think we should try sort of half the increase for a year and see where that lands us in terms of the budget. I'm going to go to Director McMahon first, then Director Bax.
Okay. I do think we need to go to these conferences. However, I think that we could be a little more frugal about how we go about it. I myself do not necessarily stay in the approved accommodation because I find less expensive accommodation. Remind me why there are two functions here. 110 and 130.
Because not all of it, I think, is for, like, municipal directors don't get funding out of some of it, I think, or corporate officer.
So function 130 is paid into by the rural areas only, and 110 general government, all areas pay into that. So the conferences for the municipal directors, for the conferences identified in the board remuneration bylaw for rural area directors, are funded through function 130. If a municipal director is attending a conference, that would have to be allocated to a general government 110.
Okay, thank you. Oh, CAO.
So I do want some clarification because there has been some questions. So we don't currently, even though the policies were changed a few years back, we never amended the budget. And so we've never budgeted for member municipal directors to attend those conferences that were outlined in the policy. So we have created several significant variances. So that's why the budget proposal is here, because our budget is not in line with the policy. So even though that's what's allowed, that's not what the budget reflects, so hence the budget proposal revised here. And I know there's additional discussion about the policy coming forward to a future committee meeting. So that too may impact this, but right now we don't currently have the budget in there for member municipal directors to attend. So that's why they're segregated too, is to ensure that the costs associated with rural directors going is only covered by rural directors, and anything from member municipal directors is covered through general government.
Follow up?
So when we have previously seen reports on our travel and conference expenses, there wasn't a breakdown between two different budget categories. So is this the first time we're doing it through two different functions?
No.
Or we were just pooling it all together in the past?
So the director, the staff report does actually have a line in there about what is out of function 130 and what's out of one, or where you're standing like budget to variance. And that's included in your variance report. I think it's the detail behind those budgets that you don't necessarily have, and that's, I think, what we're illuminating here, is the actual detail associated. And I think we all recognize that, for instance, accommodation and I think meals, like overhead meal expenses, like all of that stuff has, even through the policy, when you increase your policies for your per diem and stuff like that, we never amended the budget, and we're seeing quite significant variances because the budget hasn't been updated to for, I think, over 10 years, I think.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move through my speakers list because it's gotten quite substantial for such a small dollar value. Director Bax.
Yeah, that it's really strange that we haven't amended this for 10 years with the way prices have been going. But I personally, I agree with cutting the the budget lift in half is a good idea. And personally, I'm bowing out of attending UBCM this year. I won't. I think that we've got enough people that are going that can handle it, and so I'm.
That's very generous of you, Director Bax. The budget proposals should not require specific decisions from directors or specific sacrifices by directors, because we never know an individual's circumstances, and we never know, we never know who's going to be sitting in these chairs. So while I appreciate that, and I understand, like, we've got some similar conversations going on in Seashelt, it should never be the deciding factor behind a decision. Director Lee?
Two questions and a comment. Quite often, the comment is, quite often we decide how important a conference is depending on our advocacy, because that's what we do. So the issues of the day, we're going to have issues we don't even know about by this time. So I don't think we should limit our attendance because of the budget. We should budget for the worst case, and if we don't need to go or we don't want to go, we don't spend. That's, you don't do it ahead of time. You do it when it's time to make a decision. My second question is, how do we cover the deficits, and what would happen with a surplus?
So essentially what's happening right now is other line items are covering for it. And so we've been accommodating it through other shortfalls and other line items. And so the surplus would go into the reserve, and any deficit would come forward as part of the surplus deficit to potentially get funded through additional taxation.
Any follow-up, Director Lee?
Yes, so we still pay whether we have a budget or not. So I think you should budget the right amount and then worry about it after, is my original comment. So
Fair enough.
I
Thank
would
you.
be voting in favor of this.
The full amount.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Lee. Alternate Director Lumley.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, part of this what this budget is paying into is actually supporting like a municipal director. Is that correct?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
function.
I would say that let the municipalities budget themselves and deal with themselves rather than have everyone pay into that. That would be my suggestion, just remove that entirely. I mean, I don't know if this goes back to your comment about I can't make a decision for a future, but I think it just seems kind of weird to me that a municipality that pays part of its taxes to the SCRD would get be in this budget at all. Like, I just figure the municipality would just, if I was gonna go to UBCM, I guess Gibson's would just put it in their budget or pay for it themselves. Am I missing? I don't know, like,
there's a lot of nuance to it, of course, because of the bylaws that we've got in place and the policies, but CAO, I saw you reach for your microphone, so.
Yeah, just from a policy perspective, right now, the policy actually does mention that the SCRD, and it doesn't really extrapolate or expand on the rationale, but we do have, for instance, Team Sunshine Coast approaches to UBCM in the past and have had municipal directors be part of, we have a municipal director who's actually a board chair. And so they may represent in both seats. So we do have the policy that's coming forward for consideration at a future committee. And so I appreciate it. The decision of this is maybe at a lockstep to maybe potential future policy decisions, but those could be some nuance that could be included in the policy. You don't want to get too prescriptive in the policy, but we don't really have definitions of what regional district business is and some of the things we've encountered as far as policy and budget now.
Follow up, go ahead.
yeah, thank you, Chair. I totally understand but I would just find that confusing, just because I think if there was if a municipal was part of a regional, say, a meeting with an office of the province or the ministry or something, I don't know why that would have to be budgeted. I'm not sure why it just couldn't happen, because the parties are there in the beginning. So, and I agree with, everyone's trying to lower these taxes. I agree with Director McMahon that, I do a lot of things when I go to these events, and I just pay for them myself. I guess there's an element of in the past where I'm sure that, and not to disparage any former directors or municipal, but elected officials, but I'm sure in the past it was kind of like somewhat of a paid vacation or there's some element to that to it, but I just think that as far as directors and municipal, like councillors get somewhat remunerated for their job, a lot of it is a kind of a community aspect to it as well as going to these events. So that's how I feel.
Thank you very much. Director Inkster.
Yeah, there's lots of thoughts in here. You can cut, look at the municipal piece, but it's not necessarily been practiced that it just sticks with the municipal. You can look at the figures that are out there. So there's that issue. So if we do it, let's do it. If we would make sure that that's where everyone is, if you look at the municipal piece. I would like to know the variances, though, that were referenced. That would be helpful. Maybe the cut that you propose would match the variances, and and maybe in future we just make further cuts, etc. I don't say a lot about this, but my expenses are pretty low here, and it's SOFI'd, so you can look that up. Also, too, constituency expenses. I know that it's a different number, but, and I've done this a number of times before when I was at this table, I cut that for myself. It meant that everyone shared in my cut, but I took the hit because I don't tend to use constituency expenses. I don't know if you do, but that's two of us. I think it's $2,500 for each of us. That's $5,000, not a lot. It's very comparative to what we're arguing over here. I would cut it to $200 just to have it. I've done it before. I cut it down to almost nothing a number of years ago just to demonstrate. But like I said, everyone benefited from this. So there's a number of things, Chair, we can do. There's certain things that we municipals may need covered. And I'd love to know the variances so that we cover that and then adjust next year. And if the constituency expense has to be a cut, I'm okay with that for myself. I communicate to my own community through our own community mechanisms. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Inkster. Corporate Officer, I see your hand up.
So first, to clarify, this does not contemplate constituency expenses. That's a different line item. In terms of variances, so in 2023, the combined difference between travel and conferences was, we were in the red $15,000. And in 2024, to date, we're looking at $11,000. No, we don't have everything coded yet for 2024, so that's just where we're at
Thank you.
currently.
As for the numbers that I came up with, they were purely let's start somewhere and increase it again next year if we have to. I didn't actually look up the variance numbers, so that's an interesting additional commentary. Director McMahon?
Yes, while I personally, thanks to my Scottish ancestry, am really good at being frugal, and I'm happy to challenge my fellow directors to also be frugal, I have been reminded that everybody's circumstances are different. We have previously had people at this board who were disabled and who have much higher expenses for travel and accommodation than the rest of us. So I think we should have sufficient funds in the budget that we can meet those costs if they arise. So I'm in, I can't even remember if we've got a motion on the floor.
Not yet.
Okay, oh, goody. All right, I'll make a motion. Okay, so page 256, the budget proposal for conferences and travel-based budget lift, I would like to move that it be approved and incorporated into 2025 budget.
Thank you, and I've got a seconder for that. Is there any other discussion on the motion now that we've got it on the floor? If not, Director McMahon, I assume your hand is residual. This is voting all directors. I will call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? And Director Inkster and myself opposed. The motion is carried. Okay. That takes us to the end of that one. Next up, 6.22, Pender Harbor Health Center, 2025 capital project funding options. And there is a motion here. Oh, no, there isn't a recommendation. The recommendation is that the committee should provide direction. On page 260, there are two different options that are presented right in the middle of the page. Basically, this project could be funded by community works funds if they provide a capital plan. But CAO, I see your hand up.
Just with the added comment that based on how we've apportioned some of the prior projects, we may be fully allocated for areas, so we have to revisit that. And also just want to highlight that piece that we would have to defer it to next year and ensure that we're in compliance with the new Community Works Funds requirements.
And just to follow up on that, like we've committed our Community Works funds for up to and including 2025. Is that like the process we've gone through? So if we did defer this to 2026, that would provide an opportunity for Area A or for all of the areas to contribute with 2026 Community Works funds.
Pender Harbor is only covered through Area A. It's just an Area A service, so we wouldn't allocate other services.
Thank you. Director Lee, it's your area. I'll go to you first. Like I said, I won't make that mistake twice.
Thank you, Chair. I need to go with option 2. That deferred to the 2026 budget, pending the receipt of a capital plan. And my logic is I'd like to use gas tax money to do this. I believe I can, but I can't do it without a capital plan in place. So that's my motion.
Thank you, Director Lee, and I've got a seconder for that from Director Bax. Is there any discussion on that recommendation? If not, this is voting all directors because it's a single participant service. I will call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Director Lee. I look forward to having a discussion about it again in 2026 with hopefully some more options for them. All right, so that takes us to 6.23, which is electoral areas grant and aid discretionary balances for 2025. Directors, this is a different process. Well, I mean, it's the same process we do every year, but it is different from the rest of the agenda. You do have an extra sheet in your handout sample recommendations that give you your options and sort of show you, what you're looking at with the chart. Looking at Area A, for example, there's a $3,399 surplus. And so Director Lee could choose to roll that money into the discretionary total available for grant and aid, or decrease the discretionary budget to $20,000, for example, which would decrease taxation. Or he could increase his discretionary budget to, an example of $25,000, which would be funded through increased taxation. So I'm going to ask the directors for each area what their preference is. And then once we're done, we'll make a recommendation to wrap up all of our decisions. So somebody's got to go first, and I'm going to start at the north end of the coast. So we're going to start with Area A.
Thank you, Chair. I was scrambling to find the right wording, but my motion would be to use the surplus to decrease taxation for this year and keep my grant and aid similar to 2024. So the 21,000 for 2025.
Thank you, Director Lee. We're getting all that captured so we can get it all at once. So thank you. I'm going to go to Area B. Director Gabius.
Same for Area B.
Okay. And next up, I'm going to go to Area D. I'm going to keep working my way down the coast, which is not the order in the agenda. So Area D.
Thank you. I'm going to do it a little differently. I'd like to increase my base budget to $29,000 using $1,195 of the surplus and maintaining a surplus of $1,612.
Director Bax,
Yes,
your math is wrong.
is it?
If you're looking at your chart,
Yeah.
$25,000 is your base budget. If you use $2,806 of the surplus, you have $27,806. To get to $29,000, you have to increase taxation by an additional
Excuse me, my math is
$1,100.
wrong. It's too early for me.
So would you like to try again?
I'll try again, yeah. I'll try again. I will increase my base budget by $1,000 and leave the rest in surplus.
Or use the remaining
Use the
surplus to
remaining
reduce
surplus.
taxation?
Yeah, exactly. Use the
Okay, so
remaining.
you're increasing your base to $26,000. Thank you, Director Bax. Okay, we'll go to Area E, then we'll do F, and then we'll do your joint functions. So Director McMahon?
Yes, I would like to carry my surplus forward.
Okay, the full amount? Yeah. Thank you. Director Stamford?
I would like to roll my surplus into reducing taxation.
So maintaining a $17,006 discretionary balance? Oh, I'm sorry, $15,000.
$15,000, yeah.
My apologies. Now it's my turn to read the numbers wrong. All right, so that's that. Now we'll look at electoral area E and F, function 123. Director Stanford.
We'd like to just roll the whole thing into reducing taxation.
The $4,295 surplus?
Yeah, we agreed at last
The whole,
grant and aid to defund.
yeah, so
this
it's not
function.
just the surplus.
So we'd like to have a balance of 0 for 2025.
Okay. So just because it's a little bit different, I don't know if it needs a different motion because of the base budget component here. CAO?
Yes, I think actually we would have to make a motion that for 2025 budget, that function 123, electoral areas, grant and aid, E and F, community grants be reduced to 0, and that the 2025 or 2024 surplus be to further reduce taxation.
Okay.
So moved.
Well, slow down. We will capture it all and then we will make a block of motions. I'm just taking note here while we do that, while we work through that. Okay, so that's that one. Community schools is automatic, I believe. Yeah, okay. And then, so now we're looking at electoral area Greater Gibson's community participation, 126. This is, yeah. This is at the top of page 264. And is this E and F or is this EF and Gibson's?
No, this is E and F.
Okay,
This is the other E and F.
the other E and F funding envelope, okay.
To tell you the truth, I can't remember. Well, we didn't discuss this. I'd be as happy to roll the surplus forward, but it's, okay, great,
Roll the surplus forward to be used for grant and aid?
yes.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have all that captured. I think, yeah, I think we have that all captured. Is that correct, Tara, hopefully? Could you read that back for us, please? And then I'll look for some movers and seconders.
So for electoral area A is.
You have to use the microphone.
Thank you, Chair. For electoral area A, it is $19,000 discretionary, returning $3,399 to reduce taxation. For area B 122, it's maintaining 18,006.
Oh.
Sorry.
CAO?
Sorry, for Area A, the director actually said his discretionary balance he wanted for 21,000, which means that he would have to use 2,000, I believe, to increase his discretionary, which would means that the surplus of 1,399 would be to reduce taxation.
Thank you.
That's what I caught.
Yeah, Director Lee, you may have followed the same math mistake I did with one of the areas. So your base budget is $19,000, but I did hear you say you wanted it to be set to $21,000.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
so the intent was correct. Okay. So that would be $1,399 surplus being used to reduce taxation for Area A.
Okay, next, area B, 18,627 discretionary, returning $3,732 to taxation.
Okay.
Area 123, special recommendation to say that function 123 E and F be reduced to 0 and that the 2024 surplus be used to reduce taxation in the amount of $4,295. And community schools reduce taxation by $523 surplus and leaving the discretionary at $10,000. Greater Gibson's community participation, rolling the surplus into the discretionary for a total of $11,039. Area D 127, increasing discretionary by $1,000 and reducing taxation by $1,806. Area E 128, using the surplus, adding to the discretionary for a total of $17,435. And area F, maintaining the discretionary at $15,000 and using $2,183 to reduce taxation.
Director Lumley, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't think I spoke on this. And I think from what I heard, it was said that it would be rolled forward to discretionary. I think I'd like to reduce taxation.
These are all electoral area functions being used to fund grant and aid. Yeah, it's like in Sechelt, we've got the community investment program.
Okay, sorry, what
Yep.
was, is it? Oh, is it? Okay, all right, my mistake, sorry.
No, it's all good because the one that says electoral area E and F says it right in the title, but the one that says Greater Gibson's community participation is also only E and F. Yeah. Director McMahon, go for it.
Yes, it was invented so that the electoral areas could pay into arts and culture activities that take place in the town of Gibsons and that are funded by the town, but not by the electoral areas.
Okay. Okay, we've got the numbers that have been read back. Would somebody like to make that collection of motions? Thank you, Director Stamford. Do I have a seconder? Director Lee? Any other discussion? All those in favor, electoral area directors, that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Now, that takes us to the end of our published agenda. There was a couple things that we were going to revisit with regards to the Community Works Fund, but I'm just suggesting we maybe take like a 10-minute break to gather ourselves and see where we're at and make sure we've got the right numbers in front of us. So we'll,
Those items you think will take 10, 15 minutes at the end there?
that's the hope, is that we'll be sort of done by 12 or shortly thereafter. All right, and it's 11:53. Welcome back to the round two budget meeting for 2025 for hopefully the last time. We are having a little bit of a last conversation about the Community Works Fund allocations because we did make a different decision from the recommendations that were in the budget. So we're just going to have to look at this and make an adjustment. So I think the CAO's got a screen share ready for us here and to talk us through what we need to fix.
I just wanted to walk through, because I appreciate some members of the public too online may want to walk along. So just wanted to walk through what the decisions have been made so far. So we just have a summary here. So there were some decisions at round one that funded some decisions, so that have been included. So in this green line item, this is what the actual recommendations are. So we have two areas, that is area D and E, that are over allocated for their community works funds. And that's because we changed some of the apportionments here. So there are some options, but first I'll leave it to the directors to maybe make some motions.
Thank you, CAO. So I'll go to the speakers list. We're not going to jump into any motions. I want to hear the questions first, and then we'll go to something resembling a motion. Director McMahon.
Yes, I am just, and I think I stated it earlier in the meeting, but I'm not really happy with apportioning my 2025 installments of Community Works funds to these projects, primarily Langdale. I would like to retain the 2025 funds for projects in my area. Just due to circumstances, I have not been able to spend much of my Community Works funds in my electoral area, and I have some needs coming up, particularly around Chester Park and Chester House. So I'm wondering if that could be adjusted. Otherwise, I am fine with everything as it stands.
Okay, thank you, Director McMahon. CAO?
So what that would mean, or if I'm just understanding, is you would want to remove, and just so we're following along, is there are two installments, so that would be 196,372 would be removed out of the Langdale project, which would then change the recommendation to increase the
Financing.
financing.
Debt funding. Okay. Director McMahon, is that the logic?
Yes,
sorry,
that's the logic.
192.
I'm still slightly overspent there, but I don't mind taking that out of 2025. It's only $5,000.
Okay. And then I see Director Bax, your hand up.
Yeah, so the 1961 is, what are the funding options available? Is it just taxation?
No, you need to cut your contributions from Community Works funds.
And then what I cut from Community Works funds will be picked up in taxation through if I choose to cover this with my apportionment from the Langdale well construction, then that will increase the taxation on that particular project.
It will increase the debt funding for that project.
Debt funding, very good. I'll do that. I'll remove my surplus, my over
Deficit,
budget debt, whatever you call it.
Resolve your deficit?
Yes, please, resolve my deficit.
Okay. CAO?
Yeah, so we'll just go back and maybe amend the minutes, and once they come to the board, these should be reflected in there.
Okay.
Okay?
Because, the motion the recommendation that we passed was to approve and incorporate the budget proposal. We didn't list the numbers specifically, so we will have those resolved by the time they come up for endorsement at board. Perfect. Okay. Director McMahon, your hand is residual. Oh, my apologies, Director Lee, I see your hand. Yeah, we can get that put back up on the screen. We're also going to get printouts of it for our
I'm trying to
records.
figure out how I got a negative value there on the 9.
Those are just adding and subtracting. It doesn't mean you have a negative balance. Area A would have a remaining balance of $335,899.
They're both negative below the line then?
Yeah, it's just a simple to make the formulas work.
Okay, so I'm
based on
still
the spreadsheet.
contributing $9,604 to the.
Yes,
And I've got $335,899 left.
yes.
I got lots of money.
You might even be able to afford a bridge or two when the design work ever gets done.
And let's see how much I've contributed to projects that Area A is lightly in. Can I go?
Well, I mean, you're contributing, yeah, the 272,000 to Cliff Gilker bridges and trail remediation, the 9,600 to the environmentally sensitive framework, 48,000 and change to SCADA upgrades. Is that Director Lee's 2025 commitments? Okay.
Okay.
And if I could, Chair, there are carry forwards that aren't here. These are just the 2025 budget decisions. There's quite a few budget carry forward. There are several community works funded projects through Area A that are carried forward, such as the mains replacement.
But those dollars are not reflected here because this is only the money that's available to spend.
Correct, yeah.
You're right, they're taken off the top.
It's already taken out before you ever, yeah, before you see it here.
I'm willing to help, but not the 100 and, not quite that much.
I think that's a good place to leave it for today, though, because it is noon. We do have a couple of other meetings this afternoon. And so I don't see any other motions, any burning issues from anybody. Tara's not trying to get my attention. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. We do have one virtual attendee. Connie, did you have any questions at this time? Recognizing it's been a long 2 days, it might be easier for us to get back to you with an answer. Connie, you should be able to speak. Oh, there's your. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fine for now. I have a lot of material to go through.
We all do. Yeah, anything comes up, feel free to email us and we'll get you some answers.
Perfect.
And
thank you.
Thank you, and goodbye, everybody. We'll see you at the next one.